I'll be sharing a little bit of Counterpoint's story and the ways God's at work in Brantford and the ways in which we are partnering with God and what is already being done. Just to give you a brief history of Counterpoint, our story as a church begins on September 9th, 2007, when Grace Anglican was inspired by the Fresh Expressions movement and started a new service targeted young families with no church connection. From the beginning, it became apparent that this worship gathering was actually a new church plant in the upper hall, and the name was given Counterpoint. In 2010, I was appointed the priest of Counterpoint, and I found myself spending the first year walking with the community through a process of healing, mainly due to a change of leadership and a rebuilding and the reestablishment of our identity. So for the next couple of slides, we're going to go through Counterpoint's story. And the story which we're going to focus on, the segments of the story, are titled, the first is The Basement, The Least, and the Purple. The next story is Bongs in the Grass, Inherited Challenges and New Realities. Then we're going to speak about Putting the Neighbor Back into Neighborhood, a timely response to a critical need. And then finally, our plan, what we intend to do. And then the return for the church, in churches in the area, and the return and benefits for our neighborhood. So just to highlight some of the good things that are happening in Counterpoint, this is a picture of one of our baptismal services. And in the first 3 years of Counterpoint, we had 1 baptism. In the last 2 years, we've had over 20. Also, we've experimented with different styles of worship and different places of worship. We've had many opportunities to worship outdoors, and that's just a picture of our service at the Mohawk Park. Throughout the summer, we were hosting services on the front lawn. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. This is our Pentecost birthday party, which we had on the front lawn, and this is the bouncy castle where we invited kids from the neighborhood to come and play and have some cake, and together to celebrate the birth of the church and having this renewed sense of connection with the community, a new renewed sense of purpose and mission. Throughout the course of my time here, the diocese has visited Counterpoint. In particular, Canon Rich Jones visited us and created a report with regards to the ministry in Brantford. And this is what he said about Counterpoint. This conversation was a breath of fresh air to my soul. When describing the congregation, they use words such as eager, inventive, carefree, young, family, casual, and comfortable. Their joy is in their experience of support, nurturing their faith in life, and engaging the people who come. Attendance has almost doubled in the last 2 years, and their vision is that they grow to 200 people worshiping regularly and then to begin planting another congregation in the city. They know they have governance issues and are concerned about the confining expectations which may possibly be replaced on them by others. They recognize they have financial needs and express deep gratitude for the financial support and the leadership they have been given. The tone and atmosphere of the meeting was very different from most of other congregations. They are truly a counterpoint to the other congregations in the core of the city. Now to the first story, the cross in the basement. So my first year here, we decided that as a congregation, we were going to put our own touch on the hall, that we were going to try to create a warm, neutral space where we can invite people to come. In doing that, we took down some banners. There we have a bishop's crest, and we brought it down to the basement. And while in the basement, we found a cross. And we found that this was a symbolic move, this represented a shift in our community's focus. It was interesting to see that as the cross was being raised up, it was almost like a peace came over the room and people began to focus on the cross. And for us, it was like our purpose at one point had been buried away, and now it has been brought back into full view. And we have put the cross as central in our worship space. Now, in placing the cross on the wall, I was reminded of John 23:32, where Jesus mentions, "If I be lifted up, I will be the one to draw people." So the cross must be central to our understanding of church, and Jesus must be central to our understanding of church. Unfortunately, when we begin fresh expressions, we begin with trying to entertain people. And we've learned that what we draw people with, we draw them to. So if we draw them to fun events, are we really drawing them to Christ or to another event that will fill up their schedule? So this was our focus. This was our renewed sense of identity. To make Christ central and to make Christ known. So in year 2 as Counterpoint, we began to embody our values of loving God and our neighbors beyond our worship gatherings and taking seriously Jesus' command to make disciples. So we began to ask ourselves, what would that look like in our neighborhood? And here are some of the discoveries that we made that are helping inform our approach. The realization is, within Counterpoint's congregation, we are living amongst the least of these. The downtown has the highest percentage of Aboriginal population in all of Brantford. The downtown has the least number of family units in all of Brantford, yet has the highest number of common law couples. 68.6% of all income families in downtown are actually lone parent families, and almost 93% of those are female lone parent homes. 44% of those in the downtown have no high school diploma. So 93.4% of the downtown are rented dwellings, which is very interesting that we learned that we live in a very transient area where people don't stay long. They rent a place maybe a year or two and then they're gone. So there wasn't this cohesive core which we had to work with. We had a very transient community. The median income in 2005 for all income families in the downtown was just over $33,000, the lowest in all of Brantford. The median income of female lone parent families in 2005 was just over $25,000. And the downtown also has the highest percentage of seniors who live alone. So this is a demographic map that was put together by our diocese. So the very, very dark purple is the areas where there's a high percentage of Anglicans, and the very, very light is where has a very, very low percentage of Anglicans. And here's where Counterpoint and Grace Anglican Church find itself. We live in an area that has no connection to the Anglican Church, has no understanding of the Anglican Church, and possibly has no desire to learn about the Anglican Church. Sometimes we put things on our signs like Evensong or Bishop Terry is coming, and people in our neighborhood won't even know what that means because they have no Anglican connection. So that's very telling. We're an Anglican church trying to maintain an Anglican identity, and yet we live in a neighborhood with no Anglicans. Now this is another demographic map that speaks about the religious affiliation. So the very, very dark purple is the percentage of people, a very high percentage of people that have no religious affiliation. And the very light is areas that have a population that are tied to some sort of a religious organization. And once again, there's where we find ourselves. The highest percentage of people that have no religious affiliation. So these two shots, we're in a sense, Counterpoint and Grace Anglican, we're living in the purple. We live in an area where people have no memory of the Anglican Church, and we live in an area where people have no memory of the church whatsoever. So we need to reimagine ways of being church. We need to think of ways to re-engage our neighborhoods with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So these indicators, being in the dark purples, have pushed us to be creative in our efforts in re-engaging our neighborhood. For example, this is a share fair. It's something that we did as Counterpoint. It was a free garage sale where we invited people from our church, and we invited people from our neighborhood to declutter their homes, in a sense, declutter their lives, and to see how many resources are present within this community and what we can do to share with one another. This was also a stance against consumerism. The reality is we don't need more stuff to be relevant as the church. We have all that we need. God has resourced us with what we need. So this was a way of us investing in our neighborhood, building bridges with our neighbors. So we went around and with a pickup truck and began to pick up items for the share fair. Now this share fair was a wonderful way of building bridges. And we were able to engage in ministry that we wouldn't have been able to if we charged for the things on the table. We were able to clothe 9 migrant workers. We were able to furnish a home for a new immigrant family. We were able to clothe many children and help numerous single moms. We were able to fill 4 suitcases of clothing and toys to be sent to South America, because actually as we're having the share fair, a missionary family came by that were actually going to the south to bring these items to children. So we're able to help them. We're able to help one of our neighbors who had fallen on hard times and actually had to sell some of our items to make ends meet with some furniture and bedding. So a lot of good things came out of this. So with this renewed sense of focus and a clear understanding of those whom God is asking us to serve, as a community, as a faith community, we're continually choosing to root ourselves in this community, bringing about God's renewal, bringing about God's redemption of our neighborhood. The next story is Bongs in the Grass, Inherited Challenges and New Realities. Now, Grace Anglican, in which we find ourselves, is a very, very old church. It's referred to as the Mother Church. And once again, in this study done by Canon Rich Jones, this is what he had to say about Grace. This congregation is described as old, frail, and dying. They are also very faithful and dedicated. While they are willing to try new things, they feel stuck. They have poured resources into Counterpoint and are feeling tired about the life of the traditional congregation. They take joy in the comfort of friends they meet at Grace and the welcome of a safe community. They talked about hanging on and being in fear of running out of resources before the transformation of Brantford comes to their doors. They hope that they can use their beautiful building to connect with the community in a positive way. Now, the reason I put this in my presentation is not to knock Grace. We are grateful for being here, and there's many wonderful people with a heart for God and their community. But this is a typical story in which you find in our churches nowadays. This idea of an aging, a frail congregation. This idea of feeling stuck, trying events after events and programs after programs, not connecting with their community and burning out their volunteers, a sense of being tired and not knowing what to do, and congregations holding on and hanging on, hoping that something will come about in their neighborhood and that they would be part of it. And always this underlying hope that maybe, just maybe, God will do a new thing in our midst. So even for the Grace congregation, we're encouraging them, and in Counterpoint, we are trying to resource our mother congregation in ways of reconnecting with the community. Because reality is, in an area that has no Anglican memory or Christian memory, old ways of doing things will not bear fruit. So that's why I put it in there, because this is a typical story. And yet, I have a deep hope that God can still use the traditional church and the many wonderful gifts that it has to give to engage in its community. So when Grace first started, this was a very affluent neighborhood. Just a quick walk through the neighborhood, we have monstrous homes that are now being turned into student residents. Also, we're finding a lot of drug use and crime coming into the downtown, because as many of our major industries left Brantford, the downtown was slowly being depleted, and a lot of the money went to the suburbs. So the downtown was left to struggle basically on its own. So we had people coming in, capitalizing on the low cost of housing and turning it into multi-unit living spaces and student residences, and basically renting numerous amount of rooms. So there's one house that has like 15 people living in it. And with that comes lack of ownership or pride of ownership in the neighborhood. People, like I said before, are transient and don't want to really invest. It also opens the door for crime and drug use. And now this is the reality which we find ourselves at Grace. We find drug paraphernalia in the grass. And every time we have events outside with our children, I actually send out a group to scour the grass for bongs and needles and different packets of things. And we found them. This is the reality in which we find ourselves. Last summer, we had our Summer Sabbath series, where we went out and we had, week after week, our services on the front lawn. And we started inviting people to come to the service. People were walking by and joining us in worship, which was an amazing thing to do. We were bringing the gospel literally to our neighborhood, outside our walls. And during the prayer time, the prayers of the people, the way Counterpoint does its prayers is we don't read a litany. We have a time of silence and reflection, and we ask people to offer prayers to God, prayers that are on their heart. And someone from the congregation had on their heart to pray for our neighborhood. So they offer this wonderful prayer that God will use us, that God will continue to work in our neighborhoods, bring about renewal and redemption, and create a space where people will live and invest, and once again help this community to be a vibrant community. And they prayed. And this is what shocked me. 2 days later, a house that is adjacent to the church property was busted by a SWAT team. They broke in and found hundreds of thousands of dollars of drugs. For me, that was an immediate answer to a prayer that was given that Sunday. So the prayer was on Sunday, the house was cracked down on 2 days later. And yes, God's at work renewing, and us as a congregation are trying to be part of that renewal. So this is the reality. In a once affluent neighborhood, the reality is that we have to check our front lawns and sandboxes for needles on a regular basis. But somewhere along the way, as the neighborhood deteriorated around us, we've forgotten our role as a local parish, as active participants in God's work in our very own postal code. I remember the first Sunday I came to Counterpoint with my son Sam, and we pulled up to this wonderful, amazing building that's truly a gift to us. And he looked up and he said, "Daddy, this looks like a castle. Is this the castle?" And during my time here, I'm realizing oftentimes we act like a castle, a fortress, where our building is a barrier to the neighborhood around us. So it's our role to cross that barrier and not only invite people to our events, but get involved in what's happening in our neighborhoods and recognizing the good. So God is at work in our very own postal code. And this became very real to us on the day planned to raise our new Counterpoint sign. As we were digging for our sign, we actually found a tombstone. And this isn't any tombstone. The person whose name is on the tombstone is William K. Smith. Now, William K. Smith is the first white settler in Brantford. He was the one that donated this tract of land for the church to be built. And there's a bit of a history how he got that land, which I don't want to get into. But he also, him and his father donated funds and materials to build Mohawk Chapel. He was also involved in many community groups. He was the founder of the Masonic Lodge in Brant. So he was a very influential person. And for me, this was an indication. This tombstone, it literally smacked me in the face and said, this is a sign of where the church was. It was at one time the center of the community. It was the creator of culture. It was the meeting space. And if you look at our space, it's enormous. We seat 600 people. We can sit 600 people. We don't get that anymore. But the reality is we needed large buildings to accommodate for the flood of people that came. And I was told stories that even up to 30 years ago, they were standing room only. And finding this tombstone was the realization that those times are dead and gone. The days of the big buildings, the days that the church is the center of the community, the days where we are the movers and shakers, that people flood to us and fill our buildings and our coffers, are completely gone. So that was the negative side of it. But within me there was also this renewed sense of hope. And the hope for me was found in Ezekiel 37, where God calls the prophet to speak to the dry bones. And the Spirit of God, the wind of God, the breath of God goes over these dry bones and gives it those bones renewed life, renewed flesh. And I feel that this is occurring in the church. That the Spirit of God is giving new life, new directions, a new sense of being to our congregations. So we believe that our activity as a congregation, the vitality of our parish, is ultimately dependent on our partnership with God in our neighborhood, by meeting their needs and connecting with the activities that are already happening. Let me introduce you to Jen. Jen is a member of our congregation who's been attending Counterpoint for just over a year. And Jen is a single mom. She has 4 children. And over the course of her life, she had fallen on some hard times. A severe car accident affected her quality of life. But she's just a wonderful gift to our congregation. She comes to us with energy and passion and a desire to reach others with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
I'm Jen Stoltz, and I go to Counterpoint. It'll be a year in November, and I'm a single mom. I have 4 children, and we all attend Counterpoint at different times. Counterpoint has been helpful to me just for probably mostly emotional support right now, just finding other people that can speak into my life and share inspirations and things like that. There's been help for transportation and things like that, because I'm not driving right now. I can't afford a car right now. So luckily I live in a house where I'm close enough to walk to church. So that's the nice thing of going to a church that's downtown, because I can walk and it's accessible by bus and things like that. Counterpoint also, I think, helps when they have different things where you can bring your children as well. It's very family oriented, because as a single mom it's costly to get babysitting and things like that, and not even just the cost, but just the hassle of trying to arrange all of that. So a lot of the programs and things are really based around children and things like that. So.
Now, 2 days after this interview was taken, Jen's fridge conked out and she lost all her food. And her cupboards were bare. And she let me know what was happening. And within hours, we were able to provide a fridge for her. And actually, you know what? Let Jen say it in her own words. This is what she posted on Facebook. If you haven't heard of Counterpoint Church that meets at Grace Anglican, then you really are missing out. Within hours of telling people that my fridge had died, I had in my house a little fridge to tide us over that was filled with new food, and when I looked into the cupboards, they were filled too. I am speechless of the love and compassion and support that came from the most amazing people ever. This came after Meg from church and her kiddies picked me up to drive me down to find the food bank, and she gave me $25 of coins they had wrapped. I feel so blessed to be part of such a loving group of people. This is what living in community is really all about. If you are looking for people who will have your back through the good times and bad, I suggest you join us on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. at the Grace Anglican. So this is what it's all about. the building of community, reaching out into our neighborhoods, and meeting the needs of people, and calling forward the gifts that they have in service to Christ. Now this is Lori Dawn. Lori Dawn is the manager of Parks and Rec, and Counterpoint, we've been working with our city in creating a neighborhood association for our particular neighborhood. When I first started to explore this neighborhood association idea, I called the city and I asked, when's the last time this neighborhood has had a neighborhood association? And I was told that there hasn't been one in this particular area for over 25 years. So I said, well, that's a great opportunity for us to start one. So we had a party and we invited our neighbors. And the day of the party, I called Lori Dawn, and I said, so how many people should I expect to these things? And she said, well, typically a good turnout is about 5 to 10 people. And I said, great. We had loads of food and we had coffee ready, and those 5 people were going to have to eat a lot. We had a live band, we'd canvassed our neighborhood, and then we opened our doors. And the party started at 6, and we started getting nervous around 6:05. There wasn't really anyone coming. 6:10, people started to trickle in. And then about quarter after, we had 37 people from the neighborhood. Not church people. We weren't padding our numbers with the recycling of the sheep. We actually had people from the neighborhood come out that wanted to invest in their neighborhood. And after that first meeting, we were able to identify a core group that wanted to be the executive. Months after that, we're able to give it a name. Now we have a bank account for this neighborhood association, and the name that was given was the Victoria Heritage Neighborhood Association. And I sit on the board. At first I started as leading it up, and then handed the baton off to people in the neighborhood, and we've developed a wonderful relationship with that executive board. There's also been talks that as a church that we will almost function as a community center for the neighborhood events, because once again this neighborhood, as Lori Dawn will mention, doesn't have a space for people to recreate.
Hi everybody, my name is Lori Dawn Caven, and I'm the Manager of Recreation Development for the City of Brantford, and I work primarily out of Parks and Recreation. My job is to lead a team to engage neighborhood development, and our hope for the future in Brantford is to create an environment where we have a very proud resident-led community. One of our focuses, as those of you who know who live in Brantford, we have 5 community centers in the city of Brantford. What we don't have is designated space for particularly the youth of our city in each neighborhood. It would be wonderful if we lived in a community where after school kids could walk to the place where they recreate and do so in a safe and orderly manner. We don't have that in Brantford, so what we're doing is trying to partner with different groups, organizations in particular neighborhoods who have perhaps resources that we can utilize, such as free space, so that we can use that space to benefit neighborhood residents, seniors, children, adults, a gamut of different opportunities. We have been very fortunate to have had the support from Counterpoint Church as we work very hard in trying to develop a neighborhood association in this particular neighborhood. We have heard a lot of concerns from community residents that, they don't have the opportunities and they don't have the services that other neighborhoods have in the city. So we've been working with Counterpoint, and we're very grateful for the opportunity to do so, so that we could provide an opportunity for the residents in this area to lead initiatives pertaining to beautification, recreation, maybe tackling certain issues in the neighborhood that affects their family life and their quality of life, such as vandalism or any other issues. So that is our hope, and we hope that we're able to continue with this partnership because it is beneficial.
So this is our story so far, and we believe that God has a wonderful hand in what we have done, and also in where we are going. And in having a sense of what God is doing in our community, what is God doing in the midst of our church, together as a community we came up with a plan. I don't really like using the term strategic plan because the church is not a business. Our goal is not to just fill our pews, but to go in our neighborhood to be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. So the term that we used was not strategic plan, but a ministry map. Because a map gives us the lay of the land. It helps us to see what's out there. And like any map, we can choose which direction we want to go. We can have a sense of where God is leading us and where God is navigating us on this terrain. So in this ministry map, we have our destination. So our destination isn't programs or events. Our destination is, as we live this life of faith, what kind of people do we want to be? What kind of people do we want to become? So Counterpoint, and this is our destination, seeks to make and be disciples of Jesus, living in authentic community for the good of Brantford. Now, when we speak of disciples, the term that we've been batting around is this idea of apprentice. We want to be apprentices of Jesus. We want to work alongside the Master and learn the trade. Take on the family business, in a sense, and work with God and learn how to become like Jesus Christ. So being an apprentice or a disciple is not the programs we attend. Rather, it is the practices that frame our lives. Practices such as prayer, weekly worship, Bible reading, serving others, community and stewardship, and the sacraments. And these are all forms of our life together. And these are called the marks of discipleship. And as we move forward as Counterpoint, we want these to be distinguishing marks of us as a community. That we will be people that are reading our Bible. We will be people that are praying. We'll be people that are serving. And we'll be people that will be in our neighborhoods, helping with the renewal of all things. So in our attempt at forming disciples, because that's essential, the formation of people, that's what we're about, because Jesus commands us to go out and make disciples, go out and make apprentices, go out and teach people this way of life. So we've offered Bible studies. One Bible study in particular we called Mosaic, and we did a survey of the whole Bible in 7 months. We plan to extend Mosaic to coffee shops and local pubs. Actually, this season of Counterpoint, we're meeting in a local pub called the Piston Broke. And just last night, we had a gathering there. And at first, sometimes we have 12 people, sometimes we have 2 people, sometimes you just have the priests there. And last night was actually an instance where we just had the priests there. And we were talking, sitting there, enjoying a beverage, talking about God and the church and our struggles. And then our server came and was kind of listening in, and we were able to talk to her and get a bit of her story and talk about God. And she began to connect with this spirituality study that we were doing. It started off with 2 priests, but we welcomed her into the conversation and realized her passion, where her passions lied, her giftings. And it created an opportunity where we were able to invite her out to church, invite her to connect with a community of faith. And she got to know a little bit about us, and we got to know a little bit about her. Then after, we crossed the street and went to the coffee shop and continued our conversation. And there we met the baristas, and we were talking with them. And we got to know a bit of their story. We got to talk a little bit about God. So God was at work. It wasn't in the numbers. Like, I would have been excited if we had 15 people there. My heart kind of sunk when it was just me and my colleague. But God created that opportunity for us to speak to someone that had no church connection. Actually, a total of 4 people that night we were able to connect with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So we plan to extend this Mosaic Bible study to coffee shops and homes and wherever there's a passion to begin one, that as a community we will try to resource it. Also, Counterpoint, when I first got here, we celebrated the Eucharist probably 3 times a year. We decided to celebrate it monthly. But we do we celebrate the Eucharist in the course of a breakfast, and it's called bread and breakfast. So we invite those in our neighborhood, we invite friends to come and have breakfast with us. And this idea of breakfast came from the Gospel of John, actually, where Jesus, his first encounter with his disciples after the resurrection was by the waterside, and he invites them to come and have breakfast. He invites them to come and eat. In like manner, we invite people to come and eat and have breakfast, and then to share of the Lord's table. Now at Counterpoint, we always have 2 loaves of bread that we celebrate the Eucharist with. One that is consecrated, that we share as a community. The other, we put into a package with the bread, with salt, and with wine, and a blessing. And we bring that package out to our neighborhood and hang it on the door of one of our neighbors. And the package and the blessing says, bread so your home will never know hunger, wine so your home will always know joy, and salt that your life may always have flavor. And blessings upon you from the Counterpoint congregation. And this is an initiative that started last year. We've blessed 13 homes so far, and we do this every month. And each member of the congregation is commissioned by the congregation to go out and hang this package on the doorknob. It's not just me, it's not just the hired staff. We select someone every month to do that. So this is some of the cool things that are happening. Also mentioned that we desire to live in authentic community, and the reality is the majority of our congregation live outside of our church's neighborhood. This posed a problem. For me as a priest, I could ask people, hey, let's all move into the neighborhood. Let's all invest in the neighborhood. And if we're designed to be a neighborhood church, if we live outside the neighborhood, yes, that is definitely a challenge. This said, we have decided to identify the areas where clusters of our worshipers live, and within those neighborhoods provide a context where they can gather and commit to a common life together by eating, praying, studying scripture, and serving their neighborhood. So we've identified 3 clusters. We have a cluster of our congregation that live in the immediate downtown. We have a cluster of our congregation living in the North End, and a cluster living just east of here. So we've identified them, and it's our hope that we begin to resource them and gather those people in something that we are calling missional access points. So in developing these missional access points, me as the Counterpoint priest I've identified leaders in these different areas. So my task over the next couple of years is to resource and to train these individuals. And training these individuals is the first step in another goal that Counterpoint is seeking to achieve, is the development of an Institute for Missional Leadership. We're looking to call it the Missio Institute. So once members of our congregation are trained, we will open up this training to other congregations. And it is our hope that in the future, we'll be able to invite influential speakers in the areas of missional leadership to provide residential intensive courses on our church campus. In addition, as the pastor and priest of Counterpoint, I'm currently a candidate for the Doctor of Ministry in Missional Leadership at Northern Seminary. And I am resourcing myself to lead such an institute. My focus is not just going to be fresh expressions, but also refresh expressions. How do we use the traditional church, the traditional means, the works of the Spirit from the past to re-engage our neighborhoods in the present. In addition, Counterpoint hopes to provide internship opportunities for seminary students, social work students who are interested in this area of study and who are very much interested in the idea of community development. So that's the training. Then for the good of Brantford. So in seeking the good of Brantford, we must first recognize the good that is already present and seek to support and nurture it. For we believe the good that is happening is God at work. This said, Counterpoint has identified God at work in these neighborhood associations in the form of, there's various neighborhood associations actually, and actually I'm on the board for the neighborhood associations of Brantford. So as we move into our neighborhood and seek the neighborhood's good, Counterpoint in these clusters will seek to support the neighborhood associations that are already present. Also, we'll seek, where there isn't neighborhood associations, to be catalysts to create one, to once again re-engage our neighborhood. So that's part of the plan and the direction in which we want to go. Ways this is already happening, we're starting to build community, creating authentic community. And this is our BlackBerry group, where we have currently 16 members that we share prayer requests, share events, connect. We share scripture that we read that day that is meaningful to us. So this allows us to remain connected throughout the week. And there are some days that my phone doesn't stop buzzing. Another way we've connected as a community and with our neighborhood is through our garden. And this is a group of our Sunday school students with one of our parents, Sean, teaching them how to plant. We talk to them about sustainable living as well as creation. Now this is Stephen Boudreau. Stephen Boudreau is president of the Neighborhood Association in Eagle Place. He's also creator of a theater group called Recovery Theater. And we were able to connect with him through Counterpoint and allowing him to use our space to practice the various plays that he'll be doing. In the fall, he'll be presenting the Laramie Project. The reason for doing that play is to address the issues of bullying. And he asked Counterpoint to be a sponsor, which we will be. Also getting involved in many of the talks around that area of anti-bullying. So Stephen has become a very good friend and a supporter of Counterpoint, and that came through our engagement through the neighborhood. It's become a wonderful partnership where they use our space and we resource them, and we're able to get involved in these plays in numerous ways.
With, I don't know how else to put it, but with the people themselves. And open up in an inclusive way, because whether or not people that get involved with us and see our shows and do our programs and are involved with workshops and everything, whether or not they get committed to the theater is irrelevant. And I think that in the same way, to a certain extent, it may be a little bit irrelevant in terms of how many people that the church contacts that actually end up being members. My sense is that the theater will thrive with this attitude of being inclusive, and my sense is that your church will thrive in the same way as these types of partnerships with myself and others, and they expand the types of activities at that center, and it becomes more and more of a community place.
Once again, through our neighborhood engagement on our website, we have something called Businesses We Love. And this is friends of ours, Dan and Patty. They own Grand Sasso Restaurant. So every month, we recognize a community business. We give them a certificate. I go into their establishment and pray a blessing, and we give them a gift. And Dan and Patty was one of those businesses. And through that partnership, they just had a sense that they want to give back to the community. Now they've become one of our community partners and provide meals for our Saturday night service. So our Saturday night service, we invite a speaker in with the hot topic of the day, and the service is followed by a pasta dinner. And Dan and Patty and their restaurant provide that dinner.
We are proud supporters of the Counterpoint initiative that is going to be helping feed some of the parishioners there once a month. It was a great touching honor to receive that plaque and the homemade rosary. We always wanted to give something back to the community in some way, and this business just sort of allowed us to do it. We always wanted to do it, and we're not at the point where we can afford to, but who is? So let's just do the right thing and support the people that need it most.
So it's our hope that as we move forward, that we as a community, Counterpoint community, that we can become a resource for other churches. Not that we invite people to come and see what we're doing so they can copy it and move and try to replicate it elsewhere, but a means of inspiring, a means of direction, a means by which they can learn from our mistakes. And through the Institute for Mission, that maybe they can receive some training to go into their neighborhoods, to begin to read their context, and to see where God is leading.